Hey, hi, my friends. So, busy morning already. I'm getting my car back. Yay! um, I took an excerpt of it's the introduction uh, to Swedenborg's several books. There's like a little bit of each in this PDF, okay? So I'll just go over just a few things here, all right? So Swedenborg's his life span was 1688 to 1772. He was steeped in simultaneously in the rational world of the physical sciences and a deep Christian faith. Okay, he lived during the height of the Enlightenment, a period when intellectuals rejected dogmatic religious teachings in favor of science and reason. And his theology reflected a long struggle to understand the world of spirit through investigation of the physical world. And then ultimately, the struggle that resolved when he described it, his spiritual senses were opened and he began to interact directly with the uh, din, dins, denizens of heaven and hell and the world of spirits between. Denizens. Okay. Although his theological writings are based on experiences and visions, they may seem unbelievable to a modern reader, and they did to many of Swedenborg's contemporaries. He writes with full awareness of how difficult his accounts may be to accept. In keeping with his early scholarly training, he presents his ideas in a logical order. He's got a lot of philosophical background, okay? And drawing examples of everyday life as proof of truths of his words, inviting readers to judge for themselves. He was born in Stockholm, Sweden, January 29th, 1688. He was the second son of Jasper Swedenborg, pastor in Sweden's Lutheran State Church. At the age of 11, Emmanuel entered the University of Uppsala, where his father was a professor. Although Jasper left the university to become Bishop of Saqqara a few years later, Emmanuel remained at Uppsala, completing his studies in 1709, as was customary for the wealthy young Swedish men of his time. Okay, and so then it goes on about him. He was an inventor. He studied geology, botany, zoology, mechanical sciences, a number of scholars, inventors, mechanics, and later continuing those studies in Amsterdam and Paris. So very well educated, okay? He was associated with the Swedenborg's King Charles the 12th. He was so impressed with Emmanuel's intellect, arranged for him to be given a position. Hang on. Position suited not only because of the family's connections to the mining industry, but because it gave him ample opportunities for scientific research. Okay, and he has his first major publications was the Opera Philosophica at Mineral La Philosophical and Metallurgical Works, which was printed in 1734. I'm just going through this really quickly. Anyway, you can read about his background and the opening of his spiritual vision by day and state of full awakeness began April 1745. The exact circumstances surrounding it remain a little bit mysterious as a matter of debate. But he began to record experiences of being in contact with the spiritual world. And Swedenborg simultaneously started writing an exploration of inner meaning of the Bible base of the new understanding he gained from his visions. In the beginning, it appears to have been difficult for him. He left initial drafts of his exposition unpublished. He refused a promotion at the board of mines that he was a part of. And he just started to, really get into what he was experiencing. So, Secrets of Heaven is a verse by verse discussion of inner meanings of the Bible, beginning with Genesis and then moving through Exodus. And Swedenborg writes that the Bible should not be taken literally. In fact, parts of it make no sense if taken at face value. But everything written there has an inner spiritual meaning that he calls correspondence. For example, Genesis 1:1, in the beginning God created heaven and earth. The word beginning, Swedenborg says, corresponds to the start of a process called regeneration, when a person's inner spiritual self is starting to awaken and receive its true life from the Lord, by which he means both God and Christ, seeing them as one and the same. Heaven in this verse refers to the inner self or soul, while the earth is the outer self or the lower mind, most closely connected to the body. Swedenborg then goes on to describe the process of regeneration as reflected in the creation story. The excerpt from Secrets of Heaven in this volume includes the text of Genesis 1 and Swedenborg's commentary in its entirety. Interspersed between the chapters of commentary are explanations of principles that would become key parts of Swedenborg's theology. The correspondence between the physical world and the spiritual world, the structures of heaven and hell, the lives of angels and devils, the interaction between the soul and body, and the interconnectedness of faith and charity. Although it seems that Swedenborg intended to go through the entire Bible in this type of verse-by-verse exegesis, he never did so. Too bad. Instead, he returned to London in 1758 with 5 new titles to publish: Heaven and Hell, The White Horse, Other Planets, Last Judgment, New Jerusalem. Okay, so that's sort of like the introduction there. Let's see. He had, the spiritual interaction that was going on all the time. And so he was at this party in 1759. This was published because they would actually publish, they would say Swedenborg's going here, Swedenborg's going there, okay? And so he was at a dinner party in the Swedish city of Gothenburg. And during the party, his son became agitated, began describing a fire in Stockholm, more than 250 miles away, which was threatening his home. 2 hours later, he reported the fire had been extinguished 3 doors down from his house. It was not until 2 days later that the messengers from Stockholm arrived in Gothenburg and confirmed the details as Swedenborg had relayed them. So, anyway, he would help people and with different situations spiritually, even mundane things like this one lady had forgotten something and she was able to figure it out within a dream, and he was able to help her with that. They're well documented incidents in conjunction with some others that made Swedenborg the subject of conversation, not just in his own country but all over Europe. Okay. For example, there was a widow that was deceased. A French ambassador to Sweden was presented with a bill for a very expensive silver service her husband had bought. She was sure that he had paid but couldn't find the receipt. She asked Swedenborg for help. He had a dream in which the husband revealed the location of the receipt, a dream that turned out to be accurate. Another incident, for example, is that Queen Louisa Ulrika, she asked him to relay a particular question to her brother. Swedenborg replied to her 3 weeks later at court privately, and when he explained to her what the brother had said, she knew that Swedenborg had told her the truth because only her brother would have, said what he did. to Swedenborg, through Swedenborg to her. So they're just different incidents like that. And he talks about other books: Love and Wisdom, Divine Providence, Revelation Unveiled, which we just read, The Marriage of Love, Divine Love, Wisdom, Divine Providence, Marriage and Love. And in Revelations Unveiled, he is a return to Swedenborg's early discourse on the inner meanings of the Bible, and he was going to kind of do it in a verse-by-verse format as Secrets of Heaven, Revelation Unveiled. So, I can go through that one too. I could read that one for you. People who are unhappy in marriages on earth, or whoever marry, may still find true love once they move on to heaven. A teaching that may have had personal significance for Swedenborg, who never married. All of Swedenborg's theological books were written in Latin, published outside of Sweden, most often in London or Amsterdam. Okay, so it goes on about that. True Christianity is a systematic discussion of his theological ideas as relate to many aspects of the Christian. And so it goes on. So that's the introduction, quite lengthy. Just to give you a little sampler here before we run out of time, about heaven and hell. Okay, so Heaven and Hell is best known as a popular of the Swedenborg's book, which I read the whole thing. Swedenborg emphasizes that people find their true home based on what they love most when they get to heaven. A person who ends up in hell will find it more pleasant and comfortable than heaven, in a departure from the commonly held belief of his time. Swedenborg asserts that people of all faiths can be accepted into heaven, and that even unbaptized children will go there after death. Children, he writes, have a special place in heaven where they grow to adulthood under the care of angels. One unusual feature of Swedenborg's theology is the spiritual worlds are populated entirely by human beings. From the highest heaven to the deepest hell, there are no angels or demons who were not once living as people in the physical world. These spirits maintain their human form after death. Although that form is affected by their inner nature, people who are good will become more beautiful in heaven. The evil will grow ugly and deformed, and particularly when seen in the light of heaven, although to other evil spirits they will look normal, even attractive. Life in heaven may seem remarkably similar to life on earth. Angels wear clothes, have houses and jobs, fall in love, and get married. However, Swedenborg also describes some significant differences between this world and the next. For example, travel between two places is simultaneous. People can communicate with each other simply by thinking. Much of the material for Heaven and Hell was drawn from the first theological work Swedenborg published, Secrets of Heaven, issued in 8 quarto volumes between 1749 and 1756. Secrets of Heaven was Swedenborg's first published attempt to be put into information gleaned from his visions into writing. Though the work is primarily an exposition on the inner meaning of Genesis and Exodus, it's interspersed with commentaries are descriptions of Swedenborg's experiences in the spiritual realm and the things he learned there. However, the length of Secrets of Heaven, combined with the heavily biblical exegesis, daunted many readers in his day. Heaven and Hell was an attempt to reach a broader audience by producing a short work focused specifically on the spiritual realms. This approach found more success, and Heaven and Hell attracted an audience of both skeptics and admirers. Okay? So, what the world of spirit is, and that'll be my next video. Okay, I will get into that. Let's see, and we'll we can continue that. Leave me comments, and if this is something that you guys want, or you don't want it, just leave me a comment. Let me know. if this is something that that I should continue on in this vein, or we can just move on to